Please welcome to the dais Paul Tudor Jones II, Jeff Skoll, Mohammed Yunus, and moderator Elizabeth Gore. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Tudor Jones II, Jeff Skoll, Mohammed Yunus, and moderator Elizabeth Gore.
How is everybody? Do you know you're the first people in here from the public? It's very exciting. So I'm glad to have all of you here in our home. And I have an amazing opportunity today to, I hope, have somewhat of a lively debate among all of you and our three panelists about new models in philanthropy. And I hope in the next 50 minutes, like Johnny Cash, we will be walking the line. And it's a line that is thinning between the nonprofit and the for-profit industries. We now have venture philanthropists, we have social entrepreneurs, and JP Morgan forecasts that up to $1 trillion will be distributed by impact investing in the next 10 years. So to some, there is a new openness to making an economic return to solving social problems, but to others, this is still debatable. So with us today, we have three gentlemen who have pushed the boundaries and shown us that a strong bottom line can also impact the bottom billion. So let me introduce three gentlemen who all of you know well. Mr. Paul Tudor Jones, he is the founder of Tudor Investment Corporation and the Robin Hood Foundation. What you do not know, maybe, about Mr. Jones is that he was a welterweight boxing champ in college. So get your dukes up and get ready.
Please be nice to me.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. So Mr. Jeff Skoll is also with us. Many of you know him as the original president and founder of eBay. And now he is leading the Skoll Foundation and Participant Media. And his little known fact is that he is an amateur hypnotist. So all of you are going to love this panel by the end of it.
I can.
He can. It started with 3 women somewhere. But we'll do that another time. So, and then it is my great honor to introduce Professor Mohammed Yunus, Nobel Peace Prize winner, founder of Grameen, father of microcredit, founding board member of the UN Foundation, and his little known fact is that he was a very serious and avid Boy Scout all over the world. So all of us will do our thing at the end of the day. So let me kick off actually to Professor Yunus, the first question. Many of you know him for microfinance and his history there, but what you don't know is that Yunus Social Business, or YSB, has hundreds of profitable businesses from selling yogurt to bed nets. And I wonder if you could explain that social business model.
Yes, I can. Find a business where you take away your mind from making personal profit. It's all dedicated to solving problems. And I quickly define it by saying it's a non-dividend company to solve human problems. Then you can concentrate exclusively on designing a business to solve a specific problem. The yogurt example that you gave was a joint venture with Danone from France to address the problem of malnutrition in Bangladesh. Nearly half the children of Bangladesh are malnourished, which is a common thing in many, many countries. It's an extremely sad fact. What we did, we jointly created a company, a social business company, meaning that Danone will never take any dividend out of this company. It's all dedicated to solving the problem. And similarly, Grameen will never take any dividend. We invested this money and created the company and created a special kind of yogurt, very small cup of yogurt with all the micronutrients put into that, vitamin, iron, zinc, iodine, everything, and made it very cheap, less than 5 cents a cup, and made sure that all the poor children get the first priority, so that the marketing is designed in a way not put in the shop front, but going to the villages so that children in the villages can pick it up and eat this. And if the child eats this yogurt over a period of time, becomes a healthy child. So it's a market solution, but with the intention that this company is dedicated to that. It's self-sustaining. It recovers its cost. It makes a surplus. Surplus stays with the company so that you can expand. We have more than 100 companies now around the world doing that. So philanthropy would be a good way to transform this into such companies like the social business companies.
So I think the key word here is companies, not nonprofits.
It's companies.
Right.
All of them are registered company, tax-paying companies.
Yes.
Everything all is the same.
Very
Except
good.
we don't want to take money out of this company as a dividend.
Understood.
That's the only difference.
So Jeff, many know you as the kind of father of bringing successful social entrepreneurs to bear. But I thought it was quite interesting that you actually went into a different medium in a different industry when you started Participant Media. And you found that storytelling might be a very effective way of change. So tell us, how is Hollywood a channel for action?
Right. Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks to the organizers of this event, Randall Lane and Steve Forbes and all. I think this is quite wonderful. When I was a kid, I used to go camping in upstate New York, and my family would go for the summer, and there really wasn't much to do except read books or get beaten up by my sister. And rather than get beaten up by my sister, I read a lot of books. And by the time I was a teenager,
you needed Paul there to.
I needed the middleweight boxer.
Yeah.
I needed something.
To teach you a thing
and
or
she was
two.
only 4'10", so that says something about my athletic ability. But by the time I was a young teenager, I realized that the world of the future might not be as pleasant a place with overpopulation, competition for resources, terrible new weapons, new wars, and just all the kind of things that we could see coming down the pike. And I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to tell stories about the important issues in the world and get people involved in those issues before they got too bad. I didn't think that being a writer would necessarily be the best way of making a living. Sorry to all the Forbes people who are here. But I became an entrepreneur first, and I started a couple of companies. And then when I was at Stanford, I made friends with Piero Midiar, who told me his idea for eBay. We both left our full-time jobs. 2 years later, eBay went public. And then all of a sudden, I had more resources to tell stories than I ever would have dreamed. And a couple of light bulbs went off. One was I didn't have to write these stories to make a difference. And the second was, rather than just writing stories, what about doing film and TV that could reach people on tangible, important social issues that affect people today? So I started Participant Media in 2004 with lots of encouragement from the Hollywood community. I heard things like, the surest way to become a millionaire is to start by being a billionaire and go into the movie business, or the streets of Hollywood are littered with the corpses of people like you who think you're going to come to this town and make movies. 9 years later, we've made 44 films, including Lincoln, An Inconvenient Truth, The Kite Runner, Charlie Wilson's War, The Help, Waiting for Superman, and a number of others. These films have won a number of awards. I think we've had 35 Academy nominations, but more particularly, we've been able to deal with important issues like Afghanistan, Darfur, climate change, education, hunger, and the company continues to expand today with the aspiration of being a global media company in all corners of the globe, focused on the public interest.
And there's a rumor that you're turning a profit as well with it.
We are indeed. I mean, for me, this, I put on a philanthropist hat. I mean, the movie business is only slightly more financially attractive than the buggy whip industry, but we've done well. And for me, it's philanthropy, but for everybody else in the company, it's a for-profit company.
Great. I heard you have a Hollywood aspiration, Eunice. Is that true?
No. There's a movie in the making, and Jeff knows about it. See how it works out.
Okay. So we'll wait to see.
Yeah. On social business, of course.
All right.
Yes, indeed.
So Paul, turning to you, I think you're quite famous for being strict. on measurement, on results, to the point of defunding sometimes 10% of the charities that don't get results. But you're constantly fine-tuning your approach, and I think what's very interesting in talking with you lately is that you're putting something more valuable than money in the issues you care about, such as education, conservation of wildlife, and that's your time. So you're turning towards lawmakers to ensure that policies are put in place to support these issues, which I understand is the hardest thing you might have done yet. Is that right?
Well, I think that's a somewhat fair characterization. I'm always going to be involved with what I call winnable battles. One of the reasons that we started Robin Hood back in 87, 88 was because I think of the need then to attack poverty in a way where you could have specific outcomes, specific goals that you knew you had an excellent chance of achieving. And back then there were a dearth of organizations where you could go and fund them. I shouldn't say there was a dearth of them. They were there, but it was very hard to locate them. And then what we became was kind of an aggregator of the ones that did the very best job of providing the best measurable outcomes. So I think winnable battles has always been kind of a cornerstone of what we do at Robin Hood, of what I've done personally. In addition to winnable battles, you also want to have an outsized reward for the effort that you're putting in. And when you think about that terminology, winnable battles, outside reward, it's really just investment parlance, right? When you think about why you go make investment, it's the probability of success times the payoff. Winnable battle and outsized reward is really just taking investment parlance and putting it into philanthropic endeavors and efforts. And for me, it's been the greatest thing about, I think, my philanthropic journey is, and one of the reasons why it's been so exciting is that the road is constantly turning and the ground shifting under your feet. And the journey itself, every year there seems to be kind of new windows that open, new insights. And the one I think that kind of came for me was about 3 years ago. We had one of those offsites, the kumbaya things where you go and everyone's going to get in the room and we're going to do some ideation. I thought, oh my God, what day is this going to be? And we sat down, we had a Robin Hood offsite, and we said, okay, if we could read the paper 10 years from now, what would we like the headlines to be? And so our whole board was there, and we had a whole bunch of ideas, but we came up with 3. And the 3 were, 1, lift 1 million people out of poverty over the course of that 10 years, which is $100,000 a year. 2 was close the achievement gap. And the 3rd was impact $10 billion in public spending. All those we thought were relatively achievable goals. And then we went into these breakout sessions to try to figure out how we'd actually accomplish them. And I was in the one on how we were going to lift 1 million people out of poverty. And what was interesting was, of course, the first place we went was to our job training programs to see whether they could be impactful. Where we ended up coming out was the only way that we were going to actually lift 1 million people out of poverty was that we were going to have to impact public education. And so for the prior 17 years, Robin Hood, I think we were the very first one to give the first private grant to a charter school in the country. We're certainly the first ones to do it here in New York back in 1993. And since then, we probably fund 80 of the best charter schools that there are in the city, and I've opened 2 myself. So we were really good at delivering high-quality education to low-income families or to people of any income for that matter. But what we realized is that you can never get to scale. What I realized at that offsite was we're just playing around the edges. And when I first got involved in philanthropy, it was back in '86, I started an after-school program because that was the technology of the time to impact people. And what dawned on me at that offsite was after 24 years, I've been playing around the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is that our public education system in the United States is completely, totally broken. It's totally failed us. And so I realize now Like again, even if I look at Robin Hood, we have 4 programmatic areas. We have early childhood, K through 12 education, which is mostly charter schools. We have survivorship areas, which is food banks, homeless shelters, healthcare, and then we have job training life skill programs. The life skill programs and the job training programs and the survivorship programs, they're all really symptomatic of a core problem, which is that our public education system is completely, totally broken. This year, SAT just said it's the lowest scores in their history. We are, as a nation, we're 14th in reading, 17th in science, and we're 31st in math over the past 40 years. So we have a crisis in public education, and clearly for me, I don't think just funding charter schools, and I don't think just dealing with the symptoms of an uneducated populace, which is what we see again in poverty, in so many poverty areas that we're operating. I don't think dealing with the symptoms is the way to fix it. I think we've got to go to the cause, which means tackling public education head on.
Mm-hmm. So the key word being public, so public policy, laws, lawmakers.
Well, no question. I think again, we're going to have to get involved in every single public school in this country, and the citizenry of America is going to have to take back how we deliver educational services writ large in this country. Because right now it's basically controlled by a very small cadre of leaders, and you know, Albert Einstein said we cannot solve problems with the same thinking that created them. So our leadership has completely failed us in the last 40 years. And again, I would argue that every person in this, certainly every American in this room, has to get involved. And the only way we're going to do that is to change the way that public administration is being administered in this country and holding our elected officials accountable.
Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people that are stepping out and holding public officials accountable are social entrepreneurs. And that is a model that I think a lot of people in this room are looking at and supporting. But I want to ask both Eunice and Jeff, because Eunice, you talked to us about social business. Jeff, you've worked a lot in social entrepreneurs. To both of you, tell us the difference in those things, or do they cross over? And I'll let the two of you duke it out.
Okay. Well, first thing that social entrepreneurship is a larger kind of picture. You can run businesses, enterprises, make money at the same time, make impact. There's no problem with that. It's a mixture of the social and the profit together. It's possible. What we did, we placed ourselves in a separate category that is a non-dividend company. So we take that personal profit making completely out of the picture and concentrate exclusively on problem solving, because business as a vehicle is such a creative vehicle and such an enormous instrument which can address a problem in a sustainable way, and that's what we are addressing. Like when we compare with the philanthropy, philanthropy is a wonderful thing. Philanthropy money goes out, does an excellent job, but the money doesn't come back. So you're always dependent on getting a fresh batch of money to get the same thing done over and over again.
I think you said once a charitable dollar only has one life.
A charitable dollar has only one life.
Yes.
Then you can convert this into a business idea. The same thing is a business idea. Then social business dollar has endless life. It goes on doing again and again and again. And you create an institution and bring technology, bring improvements as you go along. It's a company. Otherwise, in a charity, money goes and no trace, and then you move on to something else. Here you own it, you're part of it, you continue to do it, and you feel proud that you have done something for things to do. And what we are doing, in a way, in each country where we go, like we are in Albania, we're in Haiti, now we are in Africa, we're in Tunisia, in Uganda, and several other places, Egypt, and so on. Every country we go, we set up an incubation company, a social business company, and then a fund, social business fund. We said for each country, $4 million for 4 years. We set it up, and it can go by itself, then take it from there. All addressing a specific problem, like we was mentioning about the education is a big issue. So instead of trying to fix the schools, what we are trying to do, bring technology. Because today, I don't think we have to repeat the same thing that we have done in the past, because technology didn't exist at that time. So we bring this technology, because technology, in third world countries, technology is coming like a communication technology, which we can bring for education and training and so forth, many other things. Healthcare. Healthcare is a tremendous thing that with technology can reach out to the people who have never been reached before. Today is possible. And we are saying that even the diagnostic services could be delivered at home, all kinds of diagnostic services, costlessly. And we designed something completely new. That's why getting away from your mind from the profit making opens up a completely new vista, which never existed before. So this is how we are trying to continue in this fashion.
And Jeff, how do social entrepreneurs then integrate into that?
Yeah, well, first off, I always love listening to Eunice, and I always listen so intently I forget what I was going to say next. But in this case, I was going to say I think you start with the problem. You start with the problem of nuclear weapons or climate change or poverty or education, and then
small problem.
Well, and then you figure all the tools in your arsenal, which range from a for-profit investment where you expect to see a return on the investment and maybe not so much of a social return, but hopefully some. And then all the way down to a grant where you expect that grant to have one life. You don't expect any money back, but you expect social returns. And all along the path in between are other opportunities to invest, double bottom line investing, PRIs, loans. I mean, the list is quite endless. Where I think social entrepreneurs fit into the picture is they are primarily bent on solving a social need. They'll find something broken in society, and like traditional entrepreneurs, they'll leverage resources to their best and highest use to try to solve these problems. And social entrepreneurship has really come a long way. When we started in this field about 13 years ago, it was kind of a rounding error. And today, social entrepreneurship is fairly ubiquitous. The idea of using business principles to promote solving social problems has become much more commonly accepted. And of course, the poster person for a social entrepreneur is Muhammad Yunus. So I think Grameen and what Yunus has done really encapsulates just the value of how one social entrepreneur can affect so many millions of people in a positive way.
So Paul, Professor Yunus said he's looking at companies, but putting all those profits back into the companies versus turning one for personal gain. But I opened the session with the question of can you reap economic benefit off solving social problems? And as a person who does well at making money, I'm just curious about your opinion on that. And I'd also love you all's, y'all's, I'm from Texas, rebuttals.
I understand what you're saying.
Someone speaks my language here. Your rebuttals to that, and then we will turn to all of you to ask questions. So I'd love to hear your response on that.
Well, if we just cut the dropout rate in the United States in half, or if we just returned to the GED attainment rate that we had back in the 60s, we'd add $50 billion of GDP.
50 billion.
50 billion annually. So clearly you can achieve great economic gains by solving social problems. And the one thing I would love to point out, Eunice said that a charitable dollar has only one life. Since Robin Hood funds Grameen here in New York City, I'm sure that we're accepted from that statement.
Oh, I'm not going to get in the middle of that.
No, I'm teasing. No,
There's a breakout room for the two
no,
of you after.
look, he has a very good point though, and we struggle with this on our board. Is if you look at our survival programs, which are homeless shelters and food banks, you know that doesn't have necessarily the same, again, asymmetric payoff that investing in education does. But at the same time, there's always going to be that humanitarian component, that part of compassion within all our hearts that's going to reach out and make us, make all of us, and Eunice too, I'm sure, want to help those people who are having difficult and distressed times.
Any comments on this before we turn?
I'm not against charity.
No,
I want to clarify
I won't even
that
infer
some of this can be converted very easily. That's the point I was going to make. That then once you can make that into a social business, then it's an endless life. It runs by itself, and it can grow. It can expand. Like we created eye care hospital. Each eye care hospital has 10,000 cataract operation per hospital, and it brings back everything. It comes to break-even point. First one 4 years, second one came to 3 years break-even point. So we now have a series of eye care hospitals, each one returning the money back, because it's not only it's a non-dividend company, you can take back the investment money. So whatever you invested, that money comes back. So you invest again. In the meantime, the other one is running. So every year you're adding more and more. You have a whole organic growth built into it, rather than what I said, one life stops there, and you're at doubt whether it will run again. Like we are now invited by, like one Binod Chaudhary from Nepal inviting us to set up the whole social business paraphernal. He said, I'm behind it. Let's go ahead and do it. So this is the way. You lay down the foundation of it, then it grows by itself. And more money, I'm coming from the philanthropy side. So if you're doing the philanthropy money, it's billions of dollars of philanthropy money. If you take a small percentage of it, say 10% of that, we'll put it in a social business investments. You see what can be done. Creative power of the people is enormous. But that creative power, that technology, never used in solving problems. It's used for making money. So why can't we do both? We can use the technology, you can use the creative power to make money. At the same time, same creative power, same technology can solve all our problems.
So I think you just challenged our audience to put 10% of their giving into social business. So I'll just repeat that. And over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Elizabeth, for your great panel moderating. I just have a quick question to Jeff, but Eunice or Paul can jump in too before we go to audience questions. Part of the art of being a great entrepreneur is the ability to recognize and then seize upon the upside surprise. And governments and bureaucracies have a harder time changing their agenda on the fly. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, well, I think first off, private organizations and individuals have a flexibility and an ability to turn issues around fairly quickly that governments and bureaucracies don't often have. But I will say in the field of social entrepreneurship over the past decade, we've seen tremendous partnerships in the UK, in the US, Canada, and other governments where they're actually partnering with organizations to advance the speed by which they're able to address some of these social issues. One example is the Skoll Foundation has done a partnership with USAID, where it's a joint partnership where we find projects by social entrepreneurs or other innovators, and then we each have the opportunity to jump in and fund alongside with the other. We've just made our first co-investment in an organization called Amazon. Amazon is this wonderful group out of Brazil that uses satellite tracking technology to protect forest lands. And they've been adopted by many of the bigger states in Brazil. And if you've heard that the deforestation rate in Brazil has come down over the last 5 or 6 years, it's in large part because of Amazon. So long answer to a short question. I do think governments and bureaucracies are necessary, but I think these partnerships can speed things up.
And quickly, since you mentioned forestry, we are involved in Haiti, and Haiti literally lost all its forest. Now 2% of forest left, and it's declining very quickly. It used to be 25% in 1985. Today, 2% less. So we created a social business idea to reforest whole of Haiti, and invited people, because forestry is a very attractive income-generating activity, employment-generating activity. At the same time, you have a green coverage, you can do everything. So lots of people are coming together. And when you have a good cause, and particularly in a social business way, because nobody is looking for money for personally, everybody comes around. Government comes around, companies come around. Now we are working with the Richard Branson to joined hands with us, Clinton Foundation. They said they would be partnering to it. And of course, the government of Haiti, they said any land you want, it's at your service. So you create a sort of demilitarized zone because nobody is trying to make a peace for themselves. It's for the cause that you're creating. So this is one advantage of that. And then we invited Haiti today, not much of employment generation and so on. So we thought, why don't you start with poultry? Because they're importing chicken and eggs from Dominican Republic every day. Nearly about 1 million eggs are imported from Dominican Republic. I said, why don't you grow it yourself? He said, well, we bring it that way. So we created a joint venture with Brazil Foods, which is one of the top poultry farms in the world. A joint venture is a social business. We'll produce all the chicken, all the eggs possible so that everybody in Haiti will have something to do. And at the same time, we bring the technology of this Brazilian company as a joint venture. So people come forward when you see the cause is waiting. And they didn't say how much money we're making. They said, well, how quickly we can do. And I gave them a challenge. The first task of the company will be to export eggs to Dominican Republic. And that's how we know that we have completed our first job. And then probably export it to the United States, where they have free trade agreement. I said, why can't you produce anything and sell to the United States? It's right there. And you change your whole economy.
We have a question over here.
This is Naveen Jain, and my question to you is for Paul here. So, Paul, I'm going to make a statement, then I'm going to ask you a question. You mentioned that education is obsolete, and as an entrepreneur, I believe that actually is obsolete rather than broken. And when something is not broken, you can't fix it. And when you're trying to fix it, you're essentially wasting your time taking your old Nokia phone, wanting to behave like an iPhone. It is just not going to happen. It's doing what it was designed to do. Our needs have changed. So we have to really, as an entrepreneur, you always have to think about what problem are we solving? Why do we want to educate the children? Our needs have changed. And with that need, you have to go back and say, what system do we need, rather than continue to fix a system that's designed for a different era. So that's my statement. The question to you is, how do we bring the innovation? Because as an entrepreneur, I believe there is no problem that's large enough that can't be solved through innovation and entrepreneurship. So how do we bring the innovations such as neuroscience or neural feedback devices, or for that matter, the engagement of video game to education? And similarly, how do we bring the microfluidic technology or the sensors to be able to diagnose the common diseases around the world? So how do we make something scalable, sustainable, use innovation, and think like an entrepreneur?
Well, that's
Small question.
That's the $500 billion question in the United States. That's what we spend every year on education, is $500 billion. What I will tell you, and I can't answer that question because I think right now we are just looking at the kind of generational change in education, and it's so funny because the universities I'm involved with, everyone's trying to understand exactly what technology, online learning, what the consequences are going to mean for those universities 10 years out. It's funny, I've had lunch in the past 3 weeks with two presidents of two top 20 universities, two chairmen of the boards of two top 20 universities. Both of their primary focus is on the disruptive impact of exactly what you're talking about online education is going to bring. And again, it's very difficult to foresee what it's going to be. What I can tell you is that private philanthropy is so critical to the process of figuring out what the public solutions will ultimately be. And when I say private philanthropy, I mean organizations, again, whether it's serving on the board of the university and trying to figure out that on the education committee, whether serving on a board like Robin Hood, where our venture philanthropy, if I go back and look at the history of our giving over the past 25 years, the intellectual capital that we brought to solving social problems in New York City far outweighs the monetary value of what we delivered on a micro basis in that city. So I think the most important takeaway is I'm not sure how to answer your question. What I do know is that when you look at the collective IQ in this room, the more time that we individually spend on trying to figure out through private philanthropy and through private institutions what the correct solutions are, that will ultimately drive public policy, and we can't be afraid to get involved in public policy to achieve those solutions. And I hope that was a half-ass answer.
That was a full-ass answer for sure.
We have a question here.
My name is George Weiss, and before I would like to address a question to Paul, but I do have to say, Muhammad Yunus, you're my idol. I haven't never met a human being that's done more for this world. Paul, you talk about and I've been working in the inner city since the same time frame, 87, 88 as yourself, and I do respect the great work Robin Hood has done. When you talk about the educational system, the public education system is being broken, I agree with you. When you talk about, what we have to do is reduce the dropout rate by 50% and what that will do to GDP. But I think the crux of the problem that we still, and this is not being critical of anybody here, but when you talk about the politicians and you talk about the different administrations, it's really that we have to get to the truth of what the real problem is. And I'm sure your experience and my experience and others is there's no truth in the numbers that are produced, in the inner cities, when the real numbers are 25 to 28% of ninth graders in the worst parts of inner city graduate high school, and you see numbers of 50, 60, 70% high school graduation rates. They're wrong. They're not truthful. So the thing is, to address the problem, we really have to, understand the real depth of the problem. Thank you.
Just to comment, I try to do this through imagination, not what the real situation is. I jump out and try to imagine what do we need to have real good education for everybody, anybody on this planet. And my imagination is there'll be only one university in the world who will be reaching out to every single child everywhere in the world. And all the best teachers will provide all the facilities and so on. So what kind of technology will be needed to make it happen? Because these technologies will happen, whether we want it or not, because the way the technology is moving. I keep saying that all the impossibles will become possibles because the distance between impossibles and possibles are shrinking every day. Why don't we make that imagination so that we can make it happen? So that if we have the imagination, we'll move in that direction. Today, if you go today, it doesn't work here, it doesn't work. Of course, today there are problems. But if you have a picture in the front that is not for education for the United States or education for New York City, it's education for the whole world we are talking about. And it can be delivered, it can be done. And that's the imagination that I'd like to work with.
Jeff, I think you had a comment.
I had a thought. A few years ago, we did a movie called Waiting for Superman, which was a documentary about education in the U.S., and we partnered with Bill Gates and the Broad Foundation, Walden, a number of educational foundations, and I think we worked with you as well, Paul. And the ultimate conclusion was that the system is broken, the system is very difficult. But there are a lot of innovators out there that are trying, and one common denominator of all the solutions is that the quality of teaching is actually really important. And no matter how much technology we use or whether we flip the model on its head, where kids are learning their lessons via Khan Academy at night and then collaborating with the teachers during the day, it's that level of teaching that's really important. We actually have a 2-hour TV special that we're doing on September 6th called Great Teachers on CBS, which hopefully will spark some conversation and tackle this very huge problem.
The only thing that I would just add is I completely agree with what you say. I'm clearly, if I just look at the last 2 or 3 years, I'm giving a considerable amount and plan on giving much more in political activities, political races. If I look at what Mayor Bloomberg's done, here's one of the biggest philanthropists in the world, one of the smartest guys in the world. He's putting his money where his mouth is in political fights on things that he believes in. And I think with regard to public education, we just can't dance around the edges anymore. We can't just support charter schools. We can't just go do the touchy-feely stuff. We've got to get involved directly in the electoral process, hold our elected officials accountable, and be a counterweight to what the other side is doing. And if, teachers' unions in the last 3 years, I think, have spent close to $500 million on political races. $500 million on political races. And it's interesting because Albert Shanker, who was actually the first person to create the first public teachers' unions, in 1986, he said the second American Revolution needs to come. And that is not about collective bargaining, but it's about bringing true professionalism into the teachers' ranks so that teachers can be economically, socially, and politically respected, which they deserve to be. And so that's what we've got to help happen. We've got to let the original founder of those unions, let his vision one day be realized, which is the second revolution in American education. And we've just got to help that process because there's 3 million teachers in this country. They are doing a fantastic job. We've got to elevate them and figure out, particularly for the ones that are doing the great job, how to make them better. For the ones that are doing an okay job, move them up into a much higher status for what they're doing and for the outcomes they're achieving.
We have a question over here.
Hi, I'm Todd Simon from Omaha, Nebraska. I'm curious about the logistics of problem solving, and I don't want to pick on the education question, although it's probably a pretty good example. It seems like there are a tremendous number of individuals, organizations, working on the problem. There's a lot of passion about it. There's money towards it. There's organizations, a lot of different local, state, federal. There's government. There's universities. How can this be a coordinated effort? In a corporate environment, the leaders of the corporation say, we want to get from here to there. They mobilize their team. They put resources towards it, and they either get there or they don't. But here, it seems like it's this giant herding of cats where there's incredible resources and passion, but no real central focus. And if you don't have that central focus, how does the big problem really get solved, whether it's education or anything else, climate change or anything?
Before you all answer, I just want to note that you might want to talk with Ray Chambers because he took a very complicated global health problem that was all over the map. It had private sector, public sector, dollars flowing in and out, very different countries, and put a business plan together towards elimination, and it's working. So I'll just flag that as a aside.
Yeah. All the time, what I did, I don't try to get overwhelmed by the giant nature of the problem. I try to bring it down to a very tiny little size. I feel I'm in the better side. He's a tiny little in front of me. So I bring it to a bite size and try to solve that bite size problem. Because after all, no matter how big the problem is a problem generated from individuals creating that problem, that I'm not educated, I don't get the education, you don't get the education, somebody doesn't, so billions of people don't get education. Can I solve the problem of 1, 2, 10? And I can do that. I find when I see that I can do that, then I feel confident that it can be done. If I can do it for 10 people, I can do it for 20 people. I repeat that. And then repetition begins. That's the way I have followed all along. Like I wanted to bring solar energy in Bangladesh. People laughed. How do you have solar energy in Bangladesh? It doesn't have any electricity. I said, that's why we want solar energy. So I was trying to sell 1 solar home system a month. It is a big struggle. And then we did and gone to 10 solar home system, 20 solar home system. Today we sell more than 1,000 solar home system per day. And we have crossed 1 million solar homes in Bangladesh. And it took us 16 years to do that 1 million solar homes in Bangladesh in one company. And it will take less than 3 years to build the second million, and less than 2 years to get the third million. So what was a small now started become bigger and bigger. Not everything can be transformed that way. But if you start at the bottom, then you can link it up gradually. That's how the microcredit was born. It was done in one village, few women, and then gradually now it's a global phenomenon. So I try to, it's my way of doing things, bring it to bite size and it's much easy. If you want to solve the problem of welfare, why should people get stuck with welfare, can't get out of it? I said, why don't we create a social business to take 5 welfare people out of welfare? 5, just so. If I know how to get 5 welfare people out of welfare, I know how to take 10, how to make 100. All I do, I have the basic prototype now. I keep on adding that. I keep on multiplying that. This is my strategy.
Jeff, you had a comment.
I think it's really interesting. You take an individual strategy like Eunice, but you also have some great examples of progress in the last number of years. Ray's work with malaria, certainly, but just in the field of pandemics, 10 years ago, it took 6 months from the time of an outbreak till the time it was verified by the WHO or CDC. 6 months. Today, that takes 20 days. And in 10 years, we'll have that down to 3 to 5 days, which means that we will soon be able to stop a pandemic from becoming a pandemic, stopping it dead in its tracks. And this is in part due to advancements in technology. It's an example of what happens when a lot of organizations put their thinking together. Example number 1. Example number 2, one of the Millennium Development Goals was to have the proportion of people without access to clean drinking water. And over the last 10 years, social entrepreneurs and others have brought 2 billion people onto the system with clean drinking water, reaching the Millennium Development Goal in 2010, 5 years ahead of schedule. So there are a lot of other big problems in the world, but it's gratifying to know that there can be real progress.
We have a question over here.
Well, first of all, thank you for all those discussions. Growing up in Ireland and then coming across the United States, sorry, my name is Pierce Lyons. I'm from Lexington, Kentucky, although my accent may belie that. But I was absolutely horrified when I brought my son to high school to see the quality of the labs in those schools. When the teachers ask you to bring in jugs, milk jugs, so they can make up their solutions, etc., I thought, my gosh, am I in a third world country or am I in the United States? We built a company, but we couldn't rely on the governments, and so we're in 128 countries, and incidentally, we're also in Bangladesh. And we decided that what we would do is create our own technology, and we would create our own labs. So every year, we build 1-2 labs right there in Lexington. But how do we take that to a global market? And so we said, young people, give young people an opportunity, and they will come up with a solution. So for example, in Bangladesh, when we went in there, we said, well, why not have a global young scientist competition? This year, we had about 25,000 kids from around the world, and incidentally, it cost $1. $1 per child, per student, to get them involved. We run an innovation program, and a young lady from Bangladesh won it all this year, and she walked away with $10,000. Remember, I'm saying 25,000 participating, $1 per person, no government, and at the same time, we then give $10,000. And to my mind, we can talk and talk and talk about what the government should or shouldn't do. I'm not rightly sure the difference between a Republican and a Democrat, nor am I particularly interested in if there is a difference. But we have to do things for our children in our labs, and if you start that way, then in fact, you can build a business. We've built a business. We compete with the Pfizers, the Elencos, and we do so at the ground level. We're cooperating with 18 to 20 different universities around the world. They all love it. Somebody said about cholera and the cholera vaccine for Haiti. We're in Haiti. We grow coffee in Haiti. We take that out to the global market. Big deal, it's a couple of $100,000 worth. But cholera, go to India. The Indian government has that technology and is only too willing to share that technology. My bottom line is, let's stop worrying about the government in your lifetime and in my lifetime. We're not going to change it. Go back to the fundamentals And we have 4 fundamentals. Our fundamentals are education.
In the interest of time, I apologize for being rude, but I think, could you sum it in a question?
We've got 4 fundamentals. The first one is education, and that starts at home. The second one is from that education comes innovation and application, and you've got to wrap it all together in this philanthropic aspect. And once you wrap it all together, you generate profits, and profits then continue the generation. Pretty well what you've done in Bangladesh.
So, Paul, let me just say, slice that down the middle. You said private philanthropy is critical to fund the process of what the public solution will be. So I think that kind of slices in the middle of what he just said.
So venture philanthropy, I think, is exactly doing that, is finding cutting-edge solutions that the public sector cannot do or will not do, utilizing them or trying to get proof of concept, and then ultimately embedding them back in the public sector. And just one quick example, 1988, 89, full-blown AIDS crisis. One of the easiest solutions for solving that was to provide clean needles to addicts in a variety of parks here in New York City. The government would not do it. How could you possibly give clean needles to addicts? Robin Hood started doing it among great controversy, and within a few years, New York State adopted the practice because of the fact we reduced the amount of the spread of AIDS so much, adopted the practice, and now they're doing that. So private philanthropy and what every person in this room can do by serving on a board is critical to driving public social solutions somewhere down the road.
Did you have a comment, Jeff?
I'd just like to say, we think of social change is a team sport. So the more of us that are working together, the better.
So let me wrap up by just reiterating the key themes. I already said the private philanthropy is critical to fund the process of what public solution will be. There can be an economic return on social problems, even though it's still being debated. And then Professor Yunus has challenged us to put 10% of our either intellectual capital or our capital into social causes. So please join me in thanking our boxer, our hypnotist, and our Boy Scout.